you can use the raise the hand function that is in the app there under, where is it again? Under.
So if you either hover over your name, you'll have an option under more. There's a tab.
Oh, really?
Or you can go on the participant list.
Great.
And look up for your name.
And Alex, thanks for the help today. Are we recording this session, Alex?
It is. The session is being recorded in case for people who missed this class, they're able to have limited access to the recording.
Right.
So just a reminder, we are being recorded.
How do you gain access to the recording?
If you email me, I will send you a link to the recording. But again, it is a limited access. It's only going to be on for a few weeks, and then that link won't be usable after a while.
What's your email address?
I'm going to share my email to everyone on the chat. That way they can send me an email if they want to link to the cloud recording.
All right, well, we're a little smaller group today. I don't think we sent out a reminder to y'all, but you guys are the ones who are here. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's say a prayer for study. Baruch Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu v'tzivanu la'aseh b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And the Torah we're involved today in looking at is this 4th chapter of the book. We have one more to go after this, and that's Green identifies Tikkun Olam as the next one of Judaism's best ideas. And I think that identification is probably one that most of us would have come up with. When you ask people or take a poll of the community, what do you love about Judaism? Now, I know some people might say the cuisine. I prefer Italian myself, but it's many people would come up and say that from their perspective, this commitment to Tikkun Olam is such a profound calling in the Jewish tradition that we make it often a pillar of what we do in Jewish life. What do we mean by Tikkun Olam? How do we define Tikkun Olam? So anybody want to share? What's your definition of Tikkun Olam? How do we define Tikkun Olam, the phrase? What does it mean for you when I say, oh, we've got to have a commitment to Tikkun Olam?
Repairing the world.
So the exact translation can be L'tiken Olam, to repair the world. Okay? What does that mean? What do you guys mean by that when you use the phrase?
Whenever you see evil or misdeeds, try to rectify it. Try to improve things for people.
Great. And Lazarus, you have your hand up.
I equate it with doing mitzvot on a regular basis.
Right.
So those are two. What's the connection to mitzvot? What's the connection to seeing what's wrong in the world? Anybody else wanted to say something? Yeah, Paulette.
I think to be a righteous person and doing the good things trying to do good things every day.
So
would be helping to repair.
Wonderful. Judith.
Leaving the world a better place than I found it.
Wonderful. How do we improve the world itself? Claude.
I would think of it as pursuing justice.
How we pursue justice itself, which is that connected to goodness? It's an interesting question. How do you feel warm fuzzies around when you hear Tikkun Olam? I mean, a lot of us do, right? We have and we connected to the temple. We have what's called ascetic council that does Tikkun Olam leadership, right? Well, Green points out a couple of things I think are really important, and then he veers off into a direction I thought strange, but interesting to come back and talk about. It's not what I would have thought he would have focused on. And that's the issue of, and we'll come to it, the issue of original sin in connection to the second story of creation in the Garden of Eden. But he reminds us that we have different expressions of what does it mean to engage in Tikkun Olam. And one of the earliest expressions is found in the prayer book. Every time we say the Aleinu prayer, which is the prayer that often people know because it almost closes the service, right? It's the adoration, it's the idea of looking forward to an age when everybody is engaged in a connection of holiness. And it has this verse, L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to repair the world under the sovereignty of the eternal. What does it mean there? The Aleinu prayer, by the way, originally was not in every service. It originally was only in the Yom Kippur service. Or Rosh Hashanah, and I'm mixed up. Where Rosh Hashanah, and you completely, we bow down to Aleinu. And the high holidays, what you were supposed to do in certain customs, earlier Jewish practice, was completely prostrate yourself. So that you completely, like the way Muslims pray, put your whole body on the floor and say that prayer. And then it got adopted into regular Jewish practice, and we bow the way we do, we choose to. But it connects it in that implication. L'taken olam, for many traditionalist Jews, it's connected to whoever talked about doing, I think, the mitzvot. That by the fulfillment of the mitzvot, by doing everything we're supposed to do, what we talked about last time or 2 times ago, halakha, we reach out towards a perfection in which we all serve God with all our hearts and souls and our minds. So the action of L'taken olam then is not necessarily only dependent upon feeding the hungry, but keeping kosher or keeping Shabbat, right? That the Jew as the lonely man of faith, or the halachic man, as we remembered Soloveitchik talked about, through their mitzvah action, brings on the repair of a world that will bring on a messianic age. So that's in this. We have when we think of our literature in Judaism, what book does that appear in?
What was the question?
What book does the Aleinu appear in? That statement.
It's the Siddur every week.
Siddur, which is a product of rabbinic Judaism, right? It's not an earliest level of Judaism. Green notes that before Aleinu talks about L'taken olam, who are the great biblical advocates for social justice?
The prophets.
Yeah, the book Nevi'im. If you remember, in our literature, our primary mother text, so to speak, is the Torah. And the Torah is argued given by the holy directly to the Jewish people. And the Torah ends at the border of the Promised Land. Right? So the very end of the Torah is, when Moses died, there never arose a Navi owed another prophet like Moses. And that's the end. What do inquiring minds want to know?
Yeah.
What happened next?
And where is what happens next contained?
Prophets can be held in such high regard if there were none as great as Moses.
Who spoke face to face, the text will say, right, in the Torah, right? But the notion of the prophetic engagement is really about life, but Eretz Yisrael. Once we settle into the Promised Land, the Torah is, in a sense, a map for behavior. The prophets and the writings, which make up what we call the Tanakh, or Hebrew Bible. We get the name Tanakh from the first letter of each word. Torah, Nevi'im, prophets, Ketuvim, writings. The writings, that last section, seem like they're an amalgamation of texts that everybody likes. So the book of Esther makes it into the writings, right? In fact, the Talmud has Esther coming to the rabbis and demanding that her book be included, right? And they say, well, God wasn't mentioned in it. And she says, God acted through me. Now, how interesting for what we can argue is a patriarchal tradition to have a young woman say, I am an agent of the deity. And they include the book, okay? Because it's that group of people, we assume the Sora people, who are the editors of that last book.
Was it Midrash? The
No.
story of Esther coming?
It's a discussion in the Talmud.
Okay. In the Talmud, okay.
In the Talmud itself. And Talmud's, multiple books too, Gemara and Mishnah. But by the way, Hanukkah, the Maccabees doesn't make it in. The Maccabees are only preserved by the church. So when you read the book of Maccabees, that's in the Apocrypha. It's not in the Hebrew Bible. But that's another class. So, but when you open up the book of Nevi'im, the first books are about
Joshua.
Thank you, Mark. Joshua, and then the Judges, and then 1st and 2nd Samuel, and then 1st and 2nd Kings, until they get to the prophets, who are these people who speak out against injustice. How they see the statedness of the Jewish people is not reflecting what the deity intended. And they speak their truth, and they argue that they're channeling God's presence as they teach. And their words are great words. One of the most famous prophetic lines is on a monument here in San Francisco that will not be torn down.
Oh, he's going to
Because it's to MLK, to Martin Luther King.
Oh.
And it says on there, a quote from the prophet Amos, that King, who was a preacher, one of the best, often quoted, let justice well up like waters, righteousness like a mighty stream. That's Amos. That's this great call for social change. You read about this notion of Tikkun Olam every year at Yom Kippur. It's one of my favorite passages that has this messianic vision that argues that God is not going to correct the world. That's the interesting thing about the prophetic notion, that I think why what Green is saying is so important in terms of saying this is important. It really speaks to the Jewish Weltanschauung about what is our connection with the deity. You know the old joke? There's going to be a flood. I only know 5 jokes, so Mark should have answered them all. Right?
I've only heard 4, Rabbi.
There's going to be a flood, and people are warned to evacuate an area, and they won't evacuate. This one family, because God will save us. And the water goes up, and a truck goes by. Come on, nope, God will save us. A boat goes by. Nope, God will save us. Finally, they're on the top of the roof, and a helicopter. Nope, God will save us. And then they die, and they're pissed. and they're in heaven. They're talking to the angels. And what's with God? We're the most firm believers. God didn't save us. And the angel says, "What do you mean? I sent you a warning, a boat, a bus, a helicopter. You're a shlemiel." But that, in some sense, represents the tension that existed in some Judaisms, certainly around a messianism, that will God messianically at a certain age bring about the messianic redemption, or do we have to bring about the messianic redemption? And the notion of Tikkun Olam is actually an argument that we are the ones who need to fix the situation. That God puts the blueprint out there, the mitzvot, so to speak, on one level, but also behavioral blueprint that is up to us to fulfill. This is a prophetic vision. So I'm gonna share my screen. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I don't have the prayer book, but isn't Elu Divarim, isn't that, I always use that sort of as a to-do list. It lists all the different things you should do.
There is that statement about basic stuff to do, right? Which is beautiful. The 10 Commandments is a not to-do list with a to-do list in it, right?
Right.
A mix of things. But here is this piece that we read on Yom Kippur morning. It's the Hawk Torah. Hawk Torah is the reading that comes after the Torah reading. It was the decision to include a text that's from the Nach part of the Tanakh. Why do we do that? Everyone tells their bar mitzvah kids, oh, the Romans forbade the reading of the Torah. So they started to read this other stuff. I think that's an insane pronouncement, right? I can only imagine Roman centurions running on and people studying Jewish text, and they say, it's illegal, we're gonna kill you. Oh no, it's the Hawk Torah, it's okay, sorry. It's probably because they were worried that we were forgetting the text. And so the text is included in the service, and it often rips off what's going on in the Torah reading. So here's this morning, Yom Kippur morning reading from the prophet Isaiah. The problem we have with identifying the prophet Isaiah is we believe there were probably 3 Isaiahs. And why do we believe that? Those are critical scholars, because there are 3 different writing styles. And it's likely that to get themselves published, there was no internet, no self-publishing. So people had to write a copy of your text. To get yourself published, you would write something sometimes and say, oh, this is from Isaiah. That's going to be what's the argument about the Zohar. The Zohar, which is the most important Jewish mystical text, probably the most popular text in the Middle Ages, more popular than the Torah in some ways. The Zohar, it was attributed to Shimon Bar Yochai, but was probably written by Moses Cordova, who was copying it in 12th century Spain, 13th century Spain. Whatever, I'm not sure. Check the dates. So
1395. 1395, according to Cush's book.
Thank you. Great. So Mark's keeping me honest here. So let's look at that. So let's look at this Isaiah, see what he says. It's really amazing. You probably know it. So let me share the text screen. Diane, can you read it for us?
Is not this the fast that I have chosen? To loosen the fetters of wickedness, to undo the bands of the yoke, and to let the oppressed go free, and that ye break every yoke? Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out of thy house? When thou seest the naked, that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh. Then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thy healing shall spring forth speedily, and thy righteousness shall go before thee. The glory of the Lord shall be thy reward.
Rearward.
Then shall thou, their rearward. Oh.
What's that mean?
Rearward. I thought it was a typo.
Sorry.
Then shall thou call, and the Lord will answer. Thou shalt cry, and he will say, here I am.
And that is an amazing text. I'm sorry that I had only found an old English style translation. But if you think about what the prophet's saying to the community, this is in the context where he starts out by saying, is this the fast that God asked for? A day of self-affliction, of lowering your head? He's arguing against false piety, right? That people are doing the mitzvot, but then not really doing them. They're not doing the spirit of action. They're saying Shema and making trade deals on the synagogue floor or the temple floor. So he's really speaking out against bad behavior. And he shifts gear. And he says, what's the real fast? To loosen the fetters of wickedness, to undo the bands of yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break. Imagine the activity, the radical notion that you have to break the yoke apart of oppression in your society. You can't stand by. You can't just wait for God. You can't just send thoughts and prayers for Isaiah, right? And then he gets specific. Give bread to the hungry. Why do we see naked people over the place, by the way? Kids today don't know this. When I say, have you heard the phrase, I'll sell the shirt off my back? Right?
They only had one set of clothing.
That clothing was so valuable. I'll never forget going to Israel for the first time with Rabbi Beth, and we stayed at a friend of a friend's old guy's house, and it took me a while to realize that he only had one set of clothing. It was a different time, right? And then he makes the statement, do you want God in your life? You want to feel God's presence? How do you feel God's presence? What's it say?
People clothes.
You do the action of repairing the world, and your light will break forth. The light in you. And God will say, here I am. And so often we say Hineni when God calls. I love that Isaiah has God saying, Hineni, I'm here with you in your spiritual journey. Don't think that I'm not in the world. I'm in the world through you. Isn't that beautiful stuff?
Yeah.
I bet you missed that at High Holidays. It's a profound statement that did inspire King and others throughout the generations. And their theology was not childish theology, right? They're not the people on the roof of that house waiting for the deity to save them. And they're not the deniers of the presence of the holy. They understand the holy. We've always understood God not to be on the top of the Sistine Chapel, right? But the ineffable, the immaterial. Boy, I'm preaching today. All right.
Rabbi, why isn't that taught more often?
Well, I do introduce it at Yom Kippur, but you're asleep by then. So there it is.
I sleep very little, so I don't know.
That's okay.
It's an amazing.
Any other more comments on that text?
I find it frustrating because when you look around, there's so little you can do to help. And I don't know how much we really can accomplish. This morning, I was taking a walk and there was a person lying on the street corner, covered with all kinds of quilts and blankets. And how could I, by myself, help this person? I did call the non-emergency police number and told them that this person is either sleeping or passed out, and they need to put them in a safe place. But there's so much around us that we're powerless to change.
Wow, so Susan raises a hard question. Any responses to her?
Yeah, I'd like to say, I think that's one of the reasons that we join a synagogue, or if you're Christian, a church group, because you can do community action with others, and then you're part of a big field of activities. I know it felt really good to me when there were all those refugees from Libya and everything, and we had the big project at Emanu-El where we gave clothes and then we went over and packed things up and everything. So it was a situation that was so far away that usually you just watch it on the news and you can't help. But through the temple in that particular case, we had the means to actually do something. That felt great.
Any other responses?
I think it also means just do the best you can. If you are wanting to be a righteous person, if you were wanting to help the man who's passed out on the street corner and just calling the police and letting them know he's there is walking in that direction.
Actually, I thought it was a woman, but I wasn't sure.
All right.
Sue, I think you're exactly right what Melanie said. We had the same thing at my apartment building. There was a crumpled young man this week, against our garages on Union Street. And people, he must have been there for a long time because he was blue by the time the paramedics came. And finally, one of my neighbors called, but all those other people walked by without calling. And then finally, one neighbor called. So I think what you did is exactly what we're supposed to do. I have a couple numbers I can give you also, in addition to the non-emergency police. But what's amazing is how many people would not have noticed and would not have called.
Yeah. I think for Isaiah, the argument is, do you do recycling, right, on your own personal level? What are you doing to give tzedakah on your own personal level? What are you doing? What are we doing on the communal level that was mentioned just now? What are we doing to encourage our leaders? Isaiah is speaking to the leadership as well, right? That it's the integration of the whole. He will argue that the individual makes a difference, but the individual has to push the society to make a difference too. So these are some good things. I want to share a little bit more. Certainly, Reform Judaism makes this a part of our identity. Annie, have your hand up?
Yeah, I guess a question about how often is one expected to be kind of implementing this, if you will? So is it your daily good deed? Is it your weekly good deed? When are we supposed to feel like we've kind of carried our share of the burden?
So Isaiah's a radical prophet. He's going to say when it's all done, right? But at the same time, Judaism is going to want you to have a framework of life to do other things too. So he's saying, I think that let's look at the Reform response. It's in the Pittsburgh Platform. Remember the Pittsburgh Platform I mentioned last week? It was the foundational statement of American Reform Judaism. So I'm going to share the screen again. And it's the number 8 at the bottom. They put this in. Right after the part, they said, well, the mitzvot, we'll pick and choose. But then they said, in full accordance with the spirit of the Mosaic legislation, which strives to regulate relations between rich and poor, we deem it our duty, this is mitzvah for them, halacha, commandment, to participate in the great tasks of modern times, to solve on the basis of justice and righteousness the problems presented by the contrasts and evils of the present organization of society. So that's their language, again, of saying the individual has and the community have responsibility. I guess there's a piece of literature, the very end of the Talmud. The Talmud is many, many volumes long. And at the very end, there's just a little section called the Pirkei Avot, the wisdom of the ancestors. I used to kid when I was a rabbinic student, I was a little full of myself, that our Rosh Yeshiva, the only part of the Talmud he knew was Pirkei Avot, because that's all he would ever quote. His name was Alexander Gottschalk. But he actually did some great things. It says there, it is not your duty to complete the task, nor is it your privilege to desist from it. So that idea that we have to be engaged and not say we're done, it leaves us in a tension. Judaism is going to want you to go be a business person and sell widgets and not close everything down and give everything away so you can solve homelessness in San Francisco. But it wants you to be part of the discussion to help solve it. And we have to be careful. I find myself having to be really careful as one of the leaders of the community to balance teaching Torah with doing Torah. What is the synagogue about? And how do we do both? And it's a balance and a hard thing that we have to maintain. And in difficult times like this, it's a challenge. Alan.
Two things. One is in the blessings and the prayers, some things are, I was thinking about Ann's comment about how much you're supposed to do, which I like your response. But I was also thinking where some things are unlimited, like honoring your mother and father. And there's certain things under that umbrella of those things are unlimited. Is it reasonable to apply that category of obligations that it's unlimited?
Right?
Yeah, that one.
I think for the prophet it would be. One wonders at times, when we look towards very traditionalist Jews, right? How much are they engaged? Hi, Susan. How much are they engaged in Tikkun Olam themselves? How are they engaging with the larger world? There was a whole push post-Holocaust to really focus on the Jewish self in those communities. How do we recover? If you think about it, I think in some of the Satmar communities, by the way, Satmar Lubavitch, people in Satmar Hasidim, people know about Satmars? They're the biggest group of Hasidim, much bigger than Lubavitch. Where's the name Satmar come from?
Probably a town in Poland.
St. Mary's. They're the St. Mary Hasidim. It's really interesting. So,
is that one of your 5 jokes?
No, that's true. It's not a joke. It's true. So they were from a town called St. Mary. Where are they going with this? Yeah, 80% of their population was wiped out. But now there's a discussion in those communities. How do we engage better with the world? That's starting to come up again. What's our role in Tikkun Olam? It's an interesting change. Nothing is static. One question, though, what one could ask is, well, why are we in this situation? Why doesn't God create, if there really is a God, create a more perfect world? Right? Where's the responsibility of the deity? Why didn't God put we want to put stop things on guns, right? That would control gun control, which I'm in favor of. But why didn't God put stop things on us? And could you be a better engineer, Hashem? Did we really have to have selfishness designed into our DNA? So Green raises, speaking of Satmar, he raises the issue of the Garden of Eden. Where to go? He raises the Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, which appears in the second story of the creation stories, right? And what does he say about it? He goes off into a side discussion of original sin. Did you guys read it that way? Yeah, I thought most of us Jews don't believe in original sin in terms of individual responsibility. I think he doesn't either. All babies are born pure with opportunity, but he's arguing that the creation falls apart in some sense because of our behavior. So what I want to do is I want us to look for a moment at these verses and put you into breakout groups just for 5 minutes. And I want you to talk about, do you believe in creationism or evolution? And what's the significance of the verse I'm going to share right now? So let me share the verse.
Can you define creationism?
The notion that we were created by a deity in 7 days, right? And have Shabbat, which is what a lot of, fundamentalist people believe, right? Versus the Darwinian notion that we've evolved over millions of years. I would argue Darwin's being proved right now in Mississippi and Florida. Never mind. So let me share a screen here. So what I want you to look at is the text here, or think about the text here. Bereshit bara Elohim, when God began to create the heaven and earth, the earth being unformed and void, with darkness over the surface of the deep and a wind from God sweeping over the water, God said, let there be light. And there was light. God called the light day, and the darkness God called night. And there was evening, and there's morning, a first day. So, Alexandra, can you break us into breakout groups for 4 minutes? Creationism, evolution, does this inform your perspective, this text?
Rabbi, do you want me to open the room now?
Yes, please.
All right.
Click your joining a breakout room, click that button, and all right. And want to get the folks back. We have our group. Let me see. Let me open that thing up there.
No, they're only 7.
They're starting to come back shortly, Rabbi.
Great, great. All right. We're halfway there. Well, I hope you had a good discussion. It's an interesting question.
I agree with you.
Bruce, how are you?
Good, good. I came down on the side of creation. Not 7 days, though. Not 7 days. Poetry, right? You have poetry, and you can't ask poetry to be the terrain. Poetry is not, the map is not the terrain either. So poetry is a metaphorical mind map of the world. And as I was explaining, I just believe spirit comes first. I don't believe spirit's an epiphenomena of matter. I think that's ridiculous. And
I got into another room.
I think it really is interesting to think about. Paulette, is that you? Can you turn off the background?
God calling.
What do you want me to turn off?
Are you okay? Never mind. All right. I neglected to read the last part of this verse. God called the light day, and the darkness God called night, and there's evening as morning, a first day. And some of the groups that I spoke to talk about poetry, believing in evolution, believing in kind of a melding of both, right? Or seeing mythological stories as poetry that inform meaning in life. That the book's goal is not to be a science book. And I think you're all right. But I want us to remember to read the Bible like Jews, not like people looking at the Sistine Chapel. So when we struggle with a text, we have to ask the question, what's the nature of the light? Now, most of us assume that the light is what?
The sun.
Sunlight, right? And we struggle with you have to struggle with the issue of translation, by the way, too.
Excellent.
If you read on, first of all, I'll give you all $1,000 if you find the word sun in that verse.
It's not the sun. It's the primal light.
Not there.
Enlightenment.
Now we're in primordial light. We're in Bruce talks about poetry, right? Metaphor in the text. We can read the Bible, the Torah, pshat, simple level, remez, a hint of deeper meaning, drash, really engaging the idea, story behind it, sod, looking for the mystic secret meaning. That's how the rabbis of one group called Pardes. Pardes, by the way, is another word for paradise, another word for the Garden of Eden. A lot of good play going on here. But I want to remind you, if we had more time, we'd look at the fourth section of this story. And on the fourth unit of time, what does God create? The sun and the moon. And by the way, the text says in the fourth unit, let them serve as signs for the set times.
Oh, for the moon.
So how long was the first day if there's no what?
Sun.
No sun.
No sun.
And there's no what?
Darkness.
And there's no what?
Oh.
There's no
Time.
time. Only how we tell time. We tell time. We're little advanced monkeys. We have our way of telling time. But if God's the only character in the story, do I know a God keeps time? Right? So I don't translate that word as there's evening, there's morning, a first day. I translate it, there was evening and there was morning, a first God unit. Because it's, how long could that time have been?
Could be thousands of years.
Or a second, right?
Absolutely.
Right? It's X plus God.
The Torah is really a physics book.
Well, I'm saying it's not. I mean, I can hang my hat on this a little bit. I think Larry Krishna would say I'm maybe misreading the text, but I don't think I am. But why I bring this up is I want to show you now a really amazing thinker named Isaac Luria, who was a Sephardic Jew. He was living in Sfat in the 1500s. Sfat is it's San Francisco 1966 or 68, right? Summer of love. Sfat is where, if you were a mystical hippie, where you went and hung out and worked on Judaism and poetry and wonder and blessing. Pretty amazing stuff. So Isaac Luria is there. He's in his 30s, and he's teaching. He's a mystical teacher, riffing off what's called the Zohar, and he develops what's called Lurianic Kabbalah. Boy, I'm covering a lot in an hour here. Lurianic Kabbalah, named after him. And one of the things Luria argues, first of all, is he looks at the text we just looked at. And what does he say is the nature of the light? He knows it's not what?
Sun.
Right.
It's not the sun.
Could it be the light of love?
Enlightenment.
The light of joy, enlightenment, all those things? Well, it says at the end of the verse, God says, V'hine tov, that it was good. So Luria argues it's the light of goodness. Now he's interested in the issue of the separation between the deity and the creation. He says, we're not God. But if God is infinite, how could God create something that's not God? You understand the problem?
Yeah.
So Luria argues that God Tzimtzum, everyone say Tzimtzum.
Tzimtzum.
That the deity, in order to create, had to make a vacuum which pulled back into the deity's self. I like to say, if you suck in your tummy for a moment, the space between your tummy and your shirt now is the universe. Mine's getting smaller, that space. I apologize. And so he argues that God pulls back to create and then pushes out creation. And in Luria's mythology, now that the deity is not the creation, how is the creation different from the deity? It's not perfect. It's not. It's imperfect, right?
Is that part of repairing the world?
So, let me see if I can pull up a text to share. So, he says, Luria posits that as God releases things into the creation, God releases the light of goodness as well as part of the fabric of creation. And the light is put into kalim, into some kind of a mystical vessel. And some of the vessels broke. This is Luria's creation fable. And some of the vessels broke. They're not perfect because God can't create perfect. By the way, Maimonides, who's an arch rationalist, will teach this in some way. He'll say, why is there cancer? Why do you fall apart? Now, he was a doctor. He said, because the deity had to make you out of what was available to make you. You're made out of sperm and egg. Of course you're fragile. Of course you're going to decline in existence. That's not evil. That's reality. That's the limitation of creation, even for the deity. So here, Luria argues the Nishbar HaKelim, some of the vessels that held the light of goodness broke and the light went missing. The sparks. And that's why you were created. That your action in the world is to go find the missing lights of goodness. And that is called tikkun olam.
Oh my goodness.
You're repairing the actual creation. And so Luria's answer to Anne is that all of your actions are involved in repair in some way.
But isn't the main thing is to find the light within yourself?
Who's speaking?
Melanie.
I'm not seeing Melanie. Where?
Melanie.
That could be part of it, yeah, as part of your own self-repair. But you'd say no. The Hasids after the Baal Shem Tov are going to say, when you bite an apple, if you don't say a bracha and taste it, you didn't release the missing sparks in the apple. But when you taste it, you're helping. That's when you're really experiencing the world, you're helping repair it too. So it's not just light inside you, it's out there. Or the light inside the people you're meeting. Remember Elijah we talked about last time or 2 times ago?
But isn't that the hand clasp in India is I, with my light, am bowing to the light within you.
Well, I'm not familiar with Indian theology and whatever group it is, but there's certainly are going to be commonalities, right? And Luria is probably ripping off at different ideas. But this is his ideas that there's what you see is broken in the world. You're a night of action. That God needs you to repair that world. Laura.
Rabbi?
I guess when you mentioned his description of the broken vessel, and kind of in response to Melanie, so many different religions and cultures and historical groups have different or similar explanations with slight twists for the same things. And the first thing that came to mind when you said the broken vessel that let all the bad stuff out is I just thought of Pandora's box in Greek mythology. It's just these same concepts.
Well, he's going to argue it's a good creation, but it's not God, and parts of it are broken, will be broken. And God's not going to fix it, by the way. You have to fix it. We have human responsibility. Come on, Susan, and then Anne.
Rabbi, did the Kabbalists think that God purposely broke the vessels, or did they spontaneously break?
Right. So, good question. We have to be careful using phrases like the Kabbalists, because they're like the Jew, right?
The one you're talking about.
So for Luria, he's going to say it's the nature of the creation itself that God does not intend for it to break, but it does. When you study, I mean, you can spend a whole few years studying this stuff, right? And when you study how they think of the world itself, they think that the universe actually reflects what we do on the earth, and that Atman Kanman is split. This original expression of creation is split, and it needs to come together. So I'll get back to fun sexual stuff. The argument that when lovers make love, who are kosher lovers for them, that act of actually making love on Shabbat is also an act of repair of the world. You're bringing God's self back together. So it's some interesting mystical stuff for another class. It's not 40 an hour long, but it does relate on this early level to the notion that God can.
So I think it was 2 weeks ago, we spent most of the time talking about being created in God's image. And I feel like I want to link between that and this, and I'm not seeing it or getting it. Am I going down the wrong path?
Well, no, I think that the image for him in this case would be the ability to be a creator and a repairer is a reflection of the God in you. And so Luria doesn't want you to sit on your tuchas and wait for and just say prayers to repair the world, but how you experience that you're furthering the creation. God rests on the day of creation. For some of these thinkers, God's always recreating the world, but you're part of the creative process. You're responsible for what's in the world, just as God is too. So he sees that as a partnership, and would certainly see the holy in every human being. And by the way, the repair is not just for Jews in Luria, right? Right? You'll have some groups who argue, oh, you're just supposed to help the poor who are Jews, right? That your neighbor really are Jews. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, that's the Schwartzes and not the McGillicuddies. That's not true in most of this thought. I'll show you the text here. Well, I'll skip it now because we're running out of time. Now, do we like this, by the way?
What do you mean?
Yeah, the discussion.
Do we like it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's much deeper if you look at the different levels between Isaiah, the Elenu, and Luria. It's much deeper than saying, oh, I'm supposed to do tikkun olam as a mitzvah, right? That it's just a great thing. I'll show you an article from Jonathan Krasnett I found here. Let me share my screen. Growing up, people who are in their 60s or older didn't hear a lot about tikkun olam.
That's right.
Right? And it is an awakening that I think happens in American Jewish life that Krasnett riffs on. He says, there were 3 discrete times overlapping where tikkun olam was popularized in Cold War America. First, post-Holocaust, educators in the 1960s, dealing with counterculture youth. And finally, social activists and Havurah members who start to bring back into American Judaism this idea that Tikkun Olam is central to what we do, that there was a forgetting, so to speak, is what Krasner argues. If you think about American Judaism in the 1950s, it's all about building synagogues in the suburbs and to renormalize American Jewish life. We didn't talk about the Holocaust, right? But there's that whole pain of post-Holocaust, et cetera. And I read another article that argues who's the great singer, Karl Bach. The Karl Bach starts talking about Tikkun Olam too, starts to reintroduce it.
Karl Bach.
Yeah, when I was a kid, in my synagogue growing up, there was an argument that Judaism wasn't mystical even. That people didn't talk about the Kabbalah. That was a little side aberration in Jewish life. Well, that certainly wasn't true. But we've come back to embracing this idea that we have to repair the world, that God, and what I love about it is to me a spiritual rationalism that says we find ourselves in existence, that we're responsible for our existence, and that God is the thing encouraging us to be that reflection, and try to make the existence better. And that we each individual, it doesn't say the rabbi should do it. It doesn't say 7 Shema Yisraels and you're okay, right? It's an ongoing process. What I don't agree with in Green is I don't agree with at all with original sin. I read it as in a feminist way. I believe the Garden of Eden is the second story to go into detail, and it's really to me about the womb. The garden is a womb, and human beings have to make the choice to enter existence or not, to be born. And I like to say, like, many of you were parents on this. You know, if I went out on a date with Rabbi Beth, and I said, we're going out, and I said to my kids, I'm leaving the latest super duper Microsoft Apple game whatever thing in the middle of the room. You can do anything you want in the house, but don't touch that super duper Microsoft Apple thing whatever. Bye. What are they going to do? Judaism is about seeking knowledge. It's the tree of knowledge. It's in the middle of the garden. I believe God wants us to eat it. And by the way, who gets knowledge first in that mythic story?
The girl.
Women.
Women.
The goddess gets it first. And she looks over at the guy next to her and has that existential moment of just complete horror. Am I going to spend eternity with that dolt? Eat this! The punishment at the end of the Garden of Eden story is you're going to have to be creators of life.
That's the punishment?
That's it. If you read it carefully, that's the punishment. But your life's going to be limited. Our lives are limited. Judaism does ask, what are you doing with your lifetime? How are you being God's partners? Don't give yourself a pass that I can't do anything. No, you can't do everything. But we can do something. Nice to see you guys next week as our last class. We're going to talk about Shabbat. I'll look forward to seeing you.
See you then. Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Be safe.
Thank you.
You too.
Oh dear.